Hey everyone, welcome back to Pawpaw's Workshop. Well, it's been kind of crazy in the shop lately. I've been doing so many different projects. And today I have 4 pens that I'm going to be turning on the lathe for last minute Christmas gifts. And yes, you can do that all in one day. And that makes a fantastic gift that will be treasured for years. I'm very happy the way these pens turned out, and I want to be able to show you exactly how I did it. The pen kits that I'm using are from the Penn State Industries, and this is the Devon Click pen kit. Now this is not a sponsored video at all for any of the products that I'm using today. The instructions to make these pens are very detailed. It requires this bushing, which is the PK10 Bush 3. And I need the top portion and the bottom portion for this blank. This is a one-piece blank, so I don't need the center band. So that piece I'll just keep on my storage and be able to move ahead. The instructions also said that the blanks need to be 3 7/32. Well, I typically will round up, so I'm going to cut the blanks to 3 1/4 inches, and I'll trim the blanks to actual size once I have the tubes glued into place. So I can do this on the table saw very easily by setting a stop block and then cutting the 4 blanks. And I've already cut them to the 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch. Remember safety first whenever you're using the table saw. And to cut these small pieces of wood, I am using a pencil with the eraser to be able to hold that little small piece in place so it doesn't move around as I cut it. This way your fingers are safe and out of the way and not in any danger of getting cut. I have all 4 blanks cut, and the next step is actually to drill the hole. Again, back to the instructions, it calls for using a 10mm drill bit to be able to put the hole through the center of these blanks. I have these bits stored where I can easily find the 10mm, so I can grab this bit right here, and rather than using the drill press, I set this up in the lathe. To me, this is a much easier way to be able to drill these holes. I need to mark the center, and the easiest way to do that, take this pencil and the ruler or a straight edge, and I can just go from corner to corner and make the X right in the center. Now, one of the things that I do is use my thumbnail to be able to use as a pivot point. I'll put it right on the edge, and then I can move the straight edge over to the alignment of the other corner, and to me that's the fastest way to be able to do it. So that's just a little tip that you might find helpful to be able to do in your shop. Okay, let's head over to the lathe and not the drill press to get these drilled. I only need the one end marked because this end is going to self-align as I tighten this chuck. And I don't need it real tight, but I want to make sure that it's sitting in there against the base so it's solid. Then just barely snug it up is all that's really necessary. Then we'll slide this over. Get the tailstock to line up right on the tip of that bit. Tighten that, and we're ready to drill the hole. You really don't need the lathe to be turning at a fast speed. I actually have the lathe turned down to the lowest speed to do this drilling operation. The nice thing about this, it will drill the holes perfectly in the center every single time. And that's something that my small drill press just couldn't do. I was not able to drill the hole all the way through these long blanks with the drill press that I have. So using this method has solved the problem and has improved the accuracy 100-fold. Plus, I don't need another separate jig to be able to hold the blank in place while I'm trying to use the drill press. So all of that has been solved. I love this method much, much better. And quite frankly, I can drill these holes in multiple blanks much quicker than I could using the old method on the drill press. So if you look at some of my older videos where I was making pens and used the drill press, you might actually see where it was a little off center. This method, you can see up close that the hole is dead center in the blank. Much improved over my old method. So please consider using this method to be able to drill the blanks. And the nice thing about it is, it takes virtually no time at all to be able to swap from one blank to the next, and you're ready to drill the next hole. Again, I'm on a tight time schedule to be able to get these 4 pens done. Okay, I've got all 4 done. We need to move to the next step now and insert the brass tubing into these. The brass tube on these pin kits is very shiny and slick, and that's not going to hold up very well. We need to take some sandpaper, and what I suggest is just get some 60 grit paper and then rough up the surface of this. And that's going to give a mechanical bond for the epoxy to be able to hold on to. And you can see how that's starting to look a little buffed. That's what you want. And completely cover the entire tube. And you want a good mechanical bond to be able to hold into that blank so you do not have a failure over time. Over the years, I have used a number of different brands of the 5-minute epoxy. But since the Starbond company has introduced their 5-minute epoxy and I gave that a try, to me this is a far superior product, and I absolutely love using this 5-minute epoxy by Starbond. In fact, this is the only brand that I use anymore, and the old ones that I have used in the past, well, they're gone because I just did not find them to be suitable compared to the Starbond 5-minute epoxy. After sanding and roughing up the surface on all 4 of these tubes, then you need to be able to wipe off any of the residue. Get rid of those little small, tiny brass shavings because that can cause a problem. But once you have it all clean, this is what it should look like, and you're ready to be able to add the epoxy and get these tubes inserted. And yes, I use rubber gloves for this because I do have a tendency to be able to get the glue all over my hands, and that's really not a lot of fun. Yes, you can use the alcohol to be able to clean your hands off, but why bother? Just use the rubber gloves. At this point, all that's necessary is to pour out equal amounts of part A and part B, and I use a little popsicle stick to be able to mix it together. I do a little bit at a time because, again, this is 5-minute epoxy and it does set up very quickly. To me, it's a lot easier to be able to do a little small batch and do 1 blank at a time than to try to pour out a lot of epoxy and end up wasting it. Once I have the brass tube completely covered with the epoxy, I'll take the pin blank and then just slide that right in there. Now when you slide it in, you're going to have a tendency to have some of the epoxy come off of the tube. So what I like to be able to do is to scrape the end off of that excess epoxy, shove the pin blank all the way through, and then add that epoxy back to it. That really does help give good adhesion to both ends of the blank. Once I have it completely covered again, then I just simply slide it in, wipe off any excess epoxy, and I'm ready to move to the next blank. Cleanup is very easy. I just use a little bit of the 91% alcohol, put it on a paper towel, wipe off my awl, which is really the only thing that gets epoxy on it, but I want to make sure that it is completely clean. Then I'll just simply move the blanks out of the way so that they'll be able to dry. Take the paper towels, roll everything up into the aluminum foil, and just simply take this and drop it over into the trash can. Like I said, it doesn't get much easier than that as far as the cleanup. Now that the epoxy is all dry, we just need to square off the ends and get this cut to the final length. The final length, of course, is going to be the length of that brass tube. Now I have a barrel trim tool that we're going to put in the 10 millimeter. So we'll take out this one, put in the 10 millimeter, and we'll take this back over to the lathe. And you can see this now being a 10 millimeter and this being a 10 millimeter brass tubing, we'll be able to fit in there, and we'll be able to flush trim and square up the ends of this blank. Now we'll go ahead and add this bit into the chuck, tighten it down, make sure it's secure, and then at this point we'll just add in our first blank. Want to make sure that it seats itself well down into the bottom so it's square. We'll tighten up this chuck and we're ready to be able to square the end of this blank and get it cut down to the correct size. So we're just going to slip this in, moving the tailstock over should cure it, and then we can do the drilling operation. Take your time with this. You don't want to drill too much because that brass is easy to turn. If you're not careful, you'll end up cutting into that brass tubing, and you really don't want to do that. But once you have finished cutting that down, you know that the end is perfectly square, and you know it's sized perfect to that brass tubing. And you can see that's right down to the brass tubing, and that's exactly what we want. We'll flip it over now and do the other end. We'll repeat this process now with the other end of this blank, and we'll do the same thing for the other three. Now that brass tubing is right to the edge. That's what we're looking for. We'll be able to put that right in there. Slip it on. Put this back on. Put some spacers in. Bring our tailstock up. To turn this blank, I'm using a roughing gouge, and it only takes literally about 5 minutes or less to be able to turn this blank down to the correct size and shape. As I'm nearing the end, I'm taking some very light passes just to finalize the shape and get it exactly the way that I want. Now, is this the only tool that can be used? No, not at all. Instead of using a roughing gouge, I could start with that and switch over to the skew chisel. Again, there are just many options to be able to do this turning, but the bottom line is it does not take long to be able to do. At this point, we're ready to be able to sand this blank. The first thing, please remember, remove that tool rest. That is a big safety issue. If you are sanding with that tool rest in place, you run the risk of catching your fingers. Now, I want to be able to turn the speed down, and on this particular lathe, you have to be able to adjust the belt manually to be able to get it back to the slower speed. Once that's done, then we're going to work through the different grits of the paper, starting with about 100 grit and working up to roughly 400 grit paper. Once this process is completed, I like to get the alcohol out again. Now this is 91% alcohol, but this will work just fine if you have 70% alcohol. What you want to be able to do is just clean this blank off. And this does actually several things. It helps to get all of that final residue off of the blank. It makes it where it'll raise the grain just a little bit, and you can see if there's any cut marks that you still need to sand away. But looking at this up close, you can see that this is turning out to be a beautiful blank. Now that that's dry, we'll sand it a little bit more. And now we also want to make sure that we don't have any cuts across our wood. So we'll go in this direction just a little bit too. And that is looking absolutely gorgeous. Now from here, we'll switch over to the next grit paper. I've gone through the various grits now all the way up to the 400 grit, and this pen blank is looking very, very good. It's smooth and it's ready for the finish. You'll want to clean it again really, really well with the alcohol. But at this point, I'm going to move on to the next blank and get all 4 of my pen blanks finished. So I'll repeat the process now and do the exact same thing for the remaining 3 blanks as I had just shown for this first one. So I'm not going to bore you with going through this process again. Let's just skip right over to the finishing part. Now I switched out the metal bushings and put on these little 3D printed white ones that I had made a year or so ago. And these work fantastic because the CA glue does not stick to them. Now what I'm able to do is use the thin CA glue with this paper towel, and I can put on 3 to 4 coats at a time very quickly. In between the 3-4 coats that I put on, I'll take the accelerator and spray just a little bit of that. You don't need much, and that will make that CA glue dry virtually instantly. From there, I'll add another 3 to 4 coats of the CA glue, and I'm using the thin, and this works absolutely amazing. It allows you to be able to very quickly go through the process, and you can put on 20-25 coats of the CA glue in a matter of just a couple of minutes. And again, after every 3 to 4 coats, I'll spray very lightly some of the accelerator to speed the drying process. Using this technique, there's very little sanding that is required. But what I will do is wet sand now with these little foam sanding discs, and I can actually go through the different grits and go up to roughly 13,000th grit on the sanding disc. And I will clean this off between each of the grits as I change, and I will move all the way up to this final grit, and this gives a mirror-like finish onto these pen blanks. And again, this process does not take long to do, but this is a wet sanding process that I will use with these foam pads. The finish that I use is a headlight cleaner. Yeah, that's right. This is a headlight cleaner that will clean and polish these blanks to a mirror-like finish. It only takes just a little bitty dab on a paper towel to be able to run it across this blank. I can work it in and polish it, and it has just enough grit in there to be able to remove any last little tiny flaws that may be in this finish. I'll buff it down with the paper towel and get all that residue off. Once that is completed, I'll inspect it, make sure that it looks really good. I'll repeat the process if necessary. Then the final process is this headlight protectant. This actually helps to maintain the finish, and it's a UV protection at the same time. Again, just a little dab will do you. It does not take much to be able to put this finish on. And again, I'll apply it with the paper towel. And here's a close-up look at this finished pen blank. This is absolutely gorgeous. So I have 3 more now to be able to complete, and then we'll be ready to assemble these pens. A pen kit this elegant and beautiful does not get much easier than this as far as the number of parts to be able to assemble. One of the things that I like to do to be able to prevent damage to these threads is actually put this onto the tip. So I'm going to take out the different blocks to be able to align this right into this place. That aligned perfect. Then I can just simply push this in place. That is just gorgeous. To assemble the other end of the pen, you have to realize that all the mechanical parts are in this assembly, and you don't want to damage these parts. This tip actually can be damaged very easily, and to protect that, we can put the bushing right on the end of this pen. Now, one of the things that I realized is that you can take the tip off of this pen. The coupler, where the threads are located, are protected. This pen was designed with that in mind, that this coupler had the threads that were protected, and it will not damage them to be able to assemble it this way. But please be aware, most pen kits are not designed that way, and you can very easily damage the threads on those couplers and make the pen worthless. So with the bushing in place, you can assemble the top part of this pen the same exact way and just press it into position. Then you can take the pen refill, slide it into the tube, add the spring to it, and then put the tip back onto the pen. And that completes the assembly of this pen. I want to show you up close just what this pen looks like and how beautiful that it is. I love how this pen turned out. This is going to make an absolutely beautiful gift. I had a lot of fun making these pens, and tell me what you think and how they look in the comments below. And guys, I look forward to seeing you in the next video real soon. Bye-bye.